Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day and welcome to a very overdue video. You ever enter the arena, you get the feeling that it's all the damn same. It's everyone's doing something slightly similar, and the end result is just every school feels the same. Now, I might be exaggerating a little bit, because obviously there are ways in which every school has its own strategy. I'm not gonna act like every school is the exact same. But that being said, I don't really think that the schools are really that unique anymore. And what I mean by that is the following. Fire, which is supposed to be an overtime school, pretty much only just Ifrits and FFAs. The only overtime that's really used in PvP anymore are Fire Elves. Ice, which is supposed to be somewhat of a tanking school, is nowhere close to a tanking school anymore, because even with pretty bad stats, you can get around 125 to 130 damage. A third example, I think a lot of people, when they think of depth, they think of drains, right? And yet, with the one exception being Scion, which you have to be below 33%, it's very rare that like a drain, even a Krulu, is actually a good idea, because the amount of health that you actually get back is really not that good, because resist has become so high that it just doesn't really work the way it used to. What I'm trying to say is, a lot of the schools have started to lose their identity, and I think there are three major reasons why, and I wanted to kind of go over them in this video and offer my ideas. So without further ado, here is my solutions on how I would make the schools more unique. Let's start with gear, and in order to compare where gear is right now, we're going to take Fire, which is supposed to be the most damaged school right now, and we're going to compare it with Ice, which is supposed to be the least damaged school, the most tankiest school. We're going to be looking at Dragoon gear because it is the most recent gear, and I also think it is the guiltiest of the crime of making the schools much less unique than they should be. Let's take the boots. So we're looking at 36 damage and 10 resist, which honestly, I think it's fairly well designed if you really want Fire to be, you know, one of those schools with a lot of damage and very little resist. So what you would think then is that on an Ice, they would amp up the resist by, you know, maybe 3 or 4%, and maybe lower the damage by, I don't know, 10 to 12%. This, unfortunately, is nowhere close to the case. When you're comparing the boots, you lose 6 damage and gain 3 resist. 30 damage is extremely high. And 14 resist is honestly also much more on the higher end than you would think, right? I mean, you would think for 10 resist to correspond to 36 damage, 14 resist should correspond to at least 20 something damage. It should be nowhere close to 30. So this is already a very good example of how gear is starting to become the same. Gear has become, unfortunately, pretty much the same, with the exception of a few resist points, a few power pip chances, and maybe a few crit ratings here and there. So one solution right off the bat is that I think the damage, resist, power pip chance, pierce, all of those have to start corresponding to the schools that they're a part of. I think one really good example of this is that I don't think pierce jewels given to Ice should be doing 6%. I think maybe Storm should be doing 6%. I think Ice should be doing 3 to 4%. That itself would reduce their damage output a lot more around the lines of a tank school. I think this is a big one for me, but Ice gear should not give critical. These boots are giving 126 crit for no reason. There is no reason for these boots to give this much crit. I think there's no reason for the Crocopatra hat to give this much crit. There's a lot of things happening in terms of stats that don't really add up. I don't think Ice should be anywhere close to having this much crit. So what I'm basically saying is that gear in general should basically respond to the school that you're wearing. I think Ice should get more resist and less damage and less pierce, right? I think Fire, if they're going along the route that they're going, should get more damage, as long as Storm gets a lot more critical, right, just to make up for it. I think Death should get a lot more block. I think Myth should get a lot more pierce. Life should get a lot more healing on its base gear. I think when you start adding all of these elements to every piece of gear, what you'll notice is that people can actually try out different play styles and actually feel like the school that they're playing. I think another seriously lost opportunity, and this is related to my first point, but the second point that I really want to drive home on why schools aren't as unique anymore is because of gear sets. If you have the Dragoon gear set, you already know what I'm talking about. If you have multiple wizards, you know what I'm talking about. every gear set gives a little bit of accuracy, a little bit of damage, and a little bit of pip conserve once you get up to the 3. Now, yes, those stats are a little bit different depending on the school you're doing, but I don't like that they're all just accuracy, damage, and conserve, right? I mean, accuracy makes sense on a storm, and maybe damage makes sense on a fire, but why do you have to give it to absolutely everybody? All that ever really does, if you have the same stats rising up on everybody, all it does is diminish the differences between the schools. I think when it comes to gear sets, and this is very important for the future of the game, I really don't think that they should be the same for every school. I think that's also very important because it would fix the issue of everyone needing to get Dragoon gear. Like, if you already have full accuracy, but accuracy is a gear set that comes out of Dragoon gear, then you don't need to get Dragoon gear. You can settle for Vanguards, right? I think the problem with making it the same thing is it almost makes it compulsory for PvP anyways. And what it does is that it makes everyone have to farm hours and hours to get the gear, because if they don't have it, turns out the school that they're going against has it, then they guarantee have more damage, guarantee have more pip conserve, guarantee have more accuracy. It's basically just an arms race that just makes every school more and more similar every update. So gear sets also have to be way more unique in my opinion. I think this last point is definitely a little bit more controversial, but I would love to hear y'all's opinions in the chat on how you think about this, because it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. I think the utility spells, if they come in a treasure card form, shouldn't be better than the original versions of the spells. So what I'm saying, right, is if you have a shift treasure card, then what that will end up really doing is, especially if it's for 3 pips, it'll end up making every school that uses a shift almost on the same level as someone who has the actual spell trained. Same with triage TCs, right? Why does it matter if you're a life and you have the 0 pip version of triage if all it takes is someone just having the treasure card version of triage, right? I think the whole point of utility spells given to schools should be that it makes them more unique, right? So when it comes to strategies where overtimes are involved, for example, which is one of the main reasons why Fire doesn't even get creative anymore, when it comes to strategies, like, they don't exist because everyone has triages, right? Everyone has 0 pip triages, everyone has 3 pip shifts. It basically makes overtiming either a death sentence or a complete waste of pips, depending on if it's a shift or a triage. I think there's an easy solution to this, and I really think that this is overdue. I think that they should add to the pip cost when it comes to treasure card versions. So if it's a shift treasure card, I don't think it should be 3 pips. It should be at least 4 pips, if not like 5. I think 5's a little bit on the steep end for shift, but I think 4 makes sense because at least you're not using power pips on other schools. For lower pip utilities, I think 0 pips is way too low because it just makes the original spell, it just nerfs it essentially, right? I think TC triages should be at least 1 pip. I think 1 pip is a great place to start. I think Pierce treasure cards, which I don't have any here, but I think they should be 1 pip. I think Shatter treasure cards, which makes Nova extremely powerful on whatever school you use, and not just Myth, I think it should be 4 pips. I honestly just think that any spell that doesn't do damage and doesn't cost pips, like basically just pure utility, I really think there needs to be a good look into why it is that way, because all it really does is make some spells that one school should have uniquely just irrelevant. I mean, things like Triage, things like Pierce, things like Shatter, things like Cleanse, things like Enfeeble. All of those spells just become slightly less relevant, and the identity of certain schools, like Storm as a blade removing school, Life as an overtime removing school, or even Myth as a shield removal school, all those identities become a lot less relevant because anybody can do what they do. I think there really is something to be said about raising the pip cost on some of these utility spells so that the schools that don't have to raise the pip cost have some sort of natural advantage in PvP compared to the people who do. So that way, yes, you can always use an overtime and run the risk, but it's a much higher risk against a Myth or a Life, as I think it should be. I think the way gear works, gear sets work, and how utility spells work, they could all use a pretty heavy look at so that schools feel unique again. I also think that it doesn't really stop there. I think shadow spells should be more utility based. I think if they ever actually make shadow spells do actually I don't know, fair damage, I think they should think about making 3 pip shadow spells that are heavily utility based, so you have another reason to use shadow pips that aligns with your school more. So yeah guys, I've been trying to put out this video for a while, and it's one of the main reasons why I kind of feel very frustrated with PvP in some ways right now. I just think anybody can just shad spam and crit it and win, when in reality, there's a lot of strategies that just don't exist because every school is starting to become more and more similar. And I hope those ideas became clear in this video. I hope I did a good job of explaining it. What do you guys think about making schools more unique? Are there better ways than the ones I've suggested? Let me know in the comments. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and my Patreon. Thank you for the love on Patreon. I love you. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. So stay awesome. And yeah.